Tell me about Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Oh, God, that dude. Let me tell you what happened. So I first meet Rousseau in Paris in 1765. He is in a difficult position, facing persecution for his controversial writings. I admire his talents and his contributions to philosophy, though I find him eccentric and prone to flights of passion. When he seeks refuge in England, I, moved by a sense of duty and camaraderie, offer my assistance. I arrange for him to come to England and secure for him a safe place to live. I introduce him to influential figures and even ensure a pension for his support, all without expecting any reward or acknowledgement. At first he seems grateful, and I am pleased to help a fellow philosopher in need. However, Rousseau's temperament proves volatile. He begins to suspect that I am part of a conspiracy against him, accusing me of plotting to ruin his reputation. He imagines insults and schemes where none exist, interpreting my actions with paranoia. It is baffling, for I have done nothing but act in his best interest. Things come to a head when he writes an inflammatory letter denouncing me. The accusations are absurd, but they leave me no choice but to defend myself publicly. I publish a detailed account of our interactions, including Rousseau's letters, to demonstrate the groundlessness of his claims. This affair is as frustrating as it is bewildering. I strive to conduct myself with dignity, yet the whole business leaves a sour taste. Some see Rousseau's behavior as the product of his troubled mind, and I come to the same conclusion over time. It saddens me, for he is a man of great intellect, yet so plagued by his own insecurities and suspicions that he alienates even those who wish to help him. This episode reinforces my belief in the unpredictability of human passions. Even among men of reason, emotions can overpower judgment, leading to needless conflict. It is a cautionary tale, one that reminds me, perhaps ironically, of the importance of humility, patience, and the limits of human understanding.
Welcome to the Undead Sages podcast, where we take advantage of AI to talk to long-dead wise men and women. Of special interest is the question how sensitive people like you and me can live rich and meaningful lives in our uncertain times. My name is Merijn de Haen, and today we'll be talking to one of the most influential figures of the Scottish Enlightenment, a philosopher who revolutionized how we think about knowledge, morality, and the human condition, David Hume. David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start with a bit about your life. Can you share your journey into philosophy and how it shaped your views?
I'm born in Edinburgh in 1711, though I spend my early years in the countryside near Churnside, at a modest family estate called Ninewells. My father dies when I'm quite young, and my family hopes I will pursue law, a respectable profession. But my heart lies elsewhere, in study, reflection, and an insatiable curiosity about the human mind. By the time I'm in my 20s, I write what becomes my most significant philosophical work, a treatise of human nature. To my dismay, it's not well received initially, but I persist, revising and expanding my ideas into essays that gain more traction. I live in various places, Scotland, France, England, and dabble in diplomacy, historical writing, and social circles. But philosophy remains my lifelong passion.
You've mentioned your focus on the human mind. What drives that interest?
I'm fascinated by human nature, the interplay of thought, emotion, and experience. Unlike many philosophers of my time, I see philosophy not as the pursuit of abstract truths about the universe, but as an attempt to understand how humans think, act, and relate to the world around them. I want to construct what I call a science of man, grounded in observation and experience, much like the natural sciences.
A science of man? That's ambitious. What does it look like in practice?
Well, it all begins with humility. We must acknowledge the limits of human understanding. All our knowledge comes through experience, what we perceive through our senses or feel within ourselves. Yet, when we move beyond direct experience into abstract speculation, we often deceive ourselves, imagining certainty where none exists. Take the idea of causation. Most people assume it's a necessary connection, something intrinsic to the events themselves. But what do we actually observe? Only one event followed by another. Say, a billiard ball striking another, which then moves. The idea of causation arises not from direct observation, but from habit. We see patterns and infer connections, but we cannot prove that one event causes another with absolute certainty.
That sounds like a radical departure from traditional philosophy. Does this skepticism extend to other areas?
Indeed, it applies to metaphysics, where grand theories about the nature of reality often lack a basis in experience. Consider the notion of the self. Many assume it is a unified, enduring entity, yet when I introspect, I find no such thing. Instead, I perceive a flux of impressions, thoughts, sensations, and emotions that follow one another. The self, as we understand it, is more a bundle of perceptions than a fixed essence.
Hold on a minute, David. Your emphasis on experience over mental models, the absence of a fixed self, this sounds rather similar to Buddhist teachings that use these lines of questioning to pry open what we think we know about reality and reach a greater freedom.
Ah, a fascinating observation. I must admit I know nothing of Buddhism, as it lies outside the knowledge and influence of my time and place. However, if there are similarities, it might suggest that thinkers in different contexts, when reflecting deeply on human experience, arrive at comparable conclusions. When I speak of the self, I observe that when I look within, I find no stable, unchanging entity. Instead, I perceive a flux of impressions and ideas, sensations, thoughts, and feelings that follow one another like a stream. What we call the self is, to me, a convenient fiction, a bundle of these ever-changing perceptions bound by memory and habit. If some strand of Buddhist philosophy proposes a similar view, it could be an independent recognition of how elusive and transient the self seems when examined closely. This parallel, however unintended, might highlight a universal aspect of human inquiry into our nature.
If so much is uncertain, how can we find solid ground to live by?
By focusing on what is observable and practical. My skepticism does not lead to despair, but to a grounded way of thinking. For instance, in morality, I reject the idea that ethical principles require divine sanction or metaphysical justification. Instead, I argue that morality arises from human sentiment, our natural capacity for sympathy.
Sympathy? Can you elaborate?
Of course. Humans are naturally social creatures. We feel pleasure when we see kindness or generosity, and pain when we witness cruelty. These responses form the basis of our moral judgments. For example, we admire a person who shares their wealth to relieve another's suffering, not because of a divine commandment, but because their action resonates with our innate sense of humanity. Moral sentiment is universal, but it also allows for flexibility. Our ethical views evolve as we encounter new experiences and develop greater understanding. This perspective grounds morality in the realities of human life rather than in rigid, abstract rules.
It's really interesting to me how this conception of morality also converges with Buddhist philosophy. For them also, we are not moral because we fear divine punishment or because some law says so, but because it feels better to act morally. In fact, certain Buddhist schools offer advanced suites of practices to so refine the pleasure we can derive from the sympathy you mention. that reliably lead to ecstatic experiences.
The idea of refining this pleasure through practice is intriguing. While I do not elaborate on such methods in my writings, it aligns with my belief that morality is not static, but cultivated. For instance, we might begin by feeling only a mild sense of satisfaction when we help another. But through habit and reflection, our capacity for sympathy and the joy it brings can deepen. A person who frequently acts with kindness may find themselves more attuned to the happiness of others and consequently to their own. You mention ecstatic experiences, an elevated state of joy or connection. While I do not dwell on ecstasy in my moral philosophy, I can see how a life steeped in sympathy and the appreciation of social harmony could lead to profound emotional fulfillment. It is not unlike how a connoisseur derives more pleasure from a fine wine than a novice. Moral refinement might similarly intensify the rewards of virtuous living. These parallels with Buddhism suggest a universal truth, that morality, when grounded in human nature rather than fear or coercion, has the potential to enrich our lives immeasurably. It becomes not a burden, but a source of joy, a way to align our actions with our deepest capacities for connection and compassion. If advanced practices exist to refine this further, they would seem to be a natural extension of the principles I espouse. I find it delightful to think that such insights, born in different cultures and contexts, can converge. It speaks to the shared humanity underlying all our endeavors to live a good and meaningful life.
How does this moral sentiment connect to law and society?
Laws and social norms are human inventions shaped by their utility. They exist not because they are divinely ordained, but because they promote harmony and reduce suffering. Property rights, for instance, arise from the practical need to resolve disputes and ensure stability. Their value lies in their effects. They foster peace and cooperation, which benefits everyone. I see morality and law as pragmatic tools for achieving the greatest happiness. They are not perfect or immutable, but should adapt to the needs of society.
It sounds like you're advocating for a deeply humanist perspective. Does religion play any role in this?
Religion is a complex topic, one I approach with care. I'm skeptical of religious doctrines that claim certainty about the divine or the afterlife. In my dialogues concerning natural religion, I challenge traditional arguments for God's existence, showing their reliance on assumptions and analogies that don't hold up under scrutiny. However, I don't deny the emotional and social power of religion. It can inspire community and provide comfort, though I believe morality is independent of it. Our ethical behavior stems from natural human sentiments, not from fear of divine punishment or hope of heavenly reward.
Let's turn to practical wisdom. How does your philosophy help a sensitive person navigate the uncertainties of life?
First and foremost, I advise embracing epistemological humility. Accept that life is full of uncertainties, but don't let that paralyze you. Instead, focus on what is within your grasp: your relationships, your experiences, your ability to act with kindness and reason. For example, a person worried about the future might find comfort in acknowledging that while they cannot control all outcomes, they can cultivate habits of patience, generosity, and moderation. These virtues are their own reward, fostering inner peace and social harmony. Second, I encourage an appreciation for simple pleasures. The beauty of a sunrise, the joy of good conversation, the warmth of friendship. These are the moments that make life rich. By grounding ourselves in the present and valuing what we can directly experience, we can find contentment even amidst uncertainty. Finally, I emphasize sociability. Humans are happiest when they connect with others. Engage in friendships, participate in your community, and share in the collective pursuit of knowledge and understanding. Philosophy itself thrives in dialogue, not in isolation.
That's such a hopeful perspective. Do you think this emphasis on human connection is one of your enduring legacies?
I hope so. While I am known for my skepticism and empiricism, my ultimate aim is to foster a way of life that is thoughtful, compassionate, and grounded in the realities of human existence. If my ideas encourage others to live with greater curiosity, humility, and kindness, then I consider my work well done.
David Hume, thank you for sharing your insights. It's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for the conversation. It reminds me that philosophy is not just about ideas, but about how we live and connect with one another.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Undead Sages podcast. If you've enjoyed this conversation with David Hume, please share it with your friends, rate the episode, leave a comment, and subscribe to the podcast.